Acculturation is also known as cultural contact. When there is a contact between two people with different cultures, there is a diffusion of culture both ways. There are a variety of ways from which culture contact can take place, like trade and commerce, industrialization, propagation of religion, education, and conquest. Trade and commerce. Ayurveda and yoga have become very popular in Western countries, and this change is related to the migration of people for jobs in trade who take along their traditional medical knowledge from the home country. Industrialization, industrial workforce becomes a melting point of cultures from different states and villages from where these workers migrate and they influence each other. Propagation of religion. Intermingling of culture can occur when groups travel to different areas for the purpose of propagation of religion. Education. Students are expected to acculturate and absorb some of the values, cultural traits or characteristics of the school. Students may need to migrate for higher education to urban areas and even to foreign lands, and where they absorb the culture. Conquest. The British brought their culture into India through conquest, and thereby an Indian is said to be the next best Englishman. Culture contact has both good and bad aspects. The introduction of scientific medicine is through culture contact. The changes in the food habits of people is brought about through culture contact. It can be both ways, good or bad. Adopting a Western diet is a significant indicator of resettled refugees. Some weight gain may be beneficial in the refugees, so acculturation becomes beneficial who were previously underweight or undernourished. However, more acculturation will result in rapid and unhealthy weight gain, with some resettled refugees quickly becoming overweight and suffering the associated morbidities. The widespread use of tobacco all over the world is because of cultural contact. And communication technologies which become effective in acculturation processes, the radio, television, cinema, and now even the internet. They have been important factors in shaping the cultural behavior patterns of people. Social security. What is social security? It is security that the society furnishes through appropriate organization against certain risks to which its members are exposed. Like any society will have some individuals who are weak because it's taking care of themselves. This may be because of some form of disability, poverty, old age, etc. So the security of maintenance that a society furnishes to these weak individuals in the population, and it is provided through in an organized manner through an appropriate organization. That is what is social security. These risks of the individuals who need social security can arise from sickness, invalidity, maternity, old age, death of a breadwinner. Two major types of social security include social insurance and social assistance. What is social insurance? It is any government sponsored program with the following four characteristics. That is, the benefits, the eligibility requirements of the beneficiaries, that who all are eligible, and other aspects are defined by statute or by laws. Second, explicit provision is made to account for the income and the expenses. Income, how does the corpus is built up, and how are the claims given to those in need. It is funded mainly by the premiums paid by the participant themselves. Little amount of premiums paid by so many participants build up the corpus, and then which is then used for those who are in need. The program serves a defined population, that is, only those who are included in it are the beneficiaries, and they are the ones who pay the premium. The participation may be either compulsory or it may be so heavily subsidized that it is lucrative to the most eligible individuals to participate. So, social security can be called as a scheme of maintaining fund from contributions made by the employees and the employer with or without a subsidy from the government. In other words, social insurance can be defined as a device to provide benefit as a right for the persons of small earnings. Now, what is social assistance? In contrast to, unlike social insurance, social assistance is the assistance that is rendered by the government to the needy persons without asking them to make any contribution. So they become entitled to receive such assistance by their circumstances without being a part of any premium paying community. An example is National Social Assistance Program is a centrally sponsored scheme of the Government of India. It provides financial assistance to elderly, widows and persons with disabilities in the form of giving social pensions. Examples are Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme, Indira Gandhi National Widow Pension Scheme, Indira Gandhi National Disability Pension Scheme, National Family Benefit Scheme, under which, in the event of the death of the breadwinner of a household, the bereaved family receives a lump sum assistance. The breadwinner should have been in the age of between 18 to 60 years. That is the usual productive age. Annapurna Scheme. It aims to provide food security to those elderly citizens who actually are eligible for the old age pension scheme but somehow remain unregistered. Under this scheme, 10 kg of free rice is provided every month to each beneficiary. Social security schemes for various sections in India. For industrial workers, these are the compensation acts and maternity benefit, etc. For civil servants, their pension, gratuity, provident fund, CGHS scheme for medical treatment. For general public also, there are insurance schemes provided by LIC, Public Provident Fund, ESI schemes, and lately National Pension Scheme. Operational research is defined as application of scientific methods of investigation to the study of a complex human organization or human services. In contrast to a mathematician working on the atomic structure is pursuing pure research. An engineering who designs a new plant for the industry is pursuing applied research. In operational research, on the other hand, there is a huge sociology component. That is, we are examining the effect of an intervention, of a new intervention in the society. Here one is concerned with the groups of people, and the purpose is to develop and introduce beneficial changes into a system, which means that an intervention which has of proven value for a disease in laboratory or in clinical setting, when it is applied on a social platform, when it is supplied through a health center, how people perceive it, how much do they use it, and does it actually benefit the society once it comes in the social circle. It has obviously of proven value in clinical settings, but once it is used in the social system, for example, can the intervention be provided through common health centers? Can the intervention be of the same quality as it was during the research? Now, do people accept that kind of intervention and go for it? Is there a problem with road connectivity and people are unable to reach the health centers for availing the benefit of these interventions? So there are so many social factors which affect the benefit of an intervention when applied on a community level. So that kind of research which assesses the feasibility of interventions or feasibility of which test new interventions efficacy is operational research. So the purpose is to develop and introduce beneficial changes into the system. This can be done in many services like educational services, what kind of education system is more beneficial. But when this type of operational research is done in health services, it is called as health operational research. So the definition can now be defined into research into strategies, interventions, knowledge that can enhance the quality, coverage, effectiveness or performance of the health system or of a program in the population in which the research is being conducted. For example, it was seen that when 1 month's medication were given to tuberculosis patients and they were asked to come after 1 month after consuming those medications, the program was highly unsuccessful. The cure rates of tuberculosis were very low. Because ideally all the drugs were effective and the cure rate should have been very good because the drugs were provided free of cost to each and every diagnosed individual, but that was not happening because in actuality the patients would fail to consume the medicine regularly, or the delivery of medicines may be defective. So sometimes the drugs are available, other times they are not, so people are erratically consuming the drugs. So operation research was done in a way of giving directly observed treatment short course in which all the doses were given on alternate day and they were consumed by the patient under direct observation, and it was found that cure rate actually increased. So this is an example of operational research. So operational research is different from clinical research or epidemiological research. Clinical research like randomized clinical trials, or epidemiological research where it is done in a group of individuals. It is done in society. Operational research is done in society, and the intention of the operational research is improvement of the system. The importance of operational research is its ability to address and solve the local problems in delivering quality health services. So logically, the phases in operational research comprise formulation of the problem, that is identifying the problem, that is only 20%, for example, only 20% of people are using the healthcare centers provided by the government. Collection of relevant data, usually on a sample, not on the entire population, but on a representative samples, and the data can be both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative are various rates, and qualitative can be going in the population, holding interviews, group discussions. So collection of relevant data and analysis of data to formulation of a hypothesis as to what is hampering proper utilization of the healthcare services provided by the government. Then depending upon those theories, deriving solutions or form the hypothesis and form various models which can be used for improving the utilization rates. Then choosing the optimal solutions and forecasting results for each one of them by using various models, forecasting that putting this, when this intervention is done, this percentage of utilization can improve. So forecasting results. Then testing the chosen solutions in form of pilot projects. And if pilot projects, it can be when one population is given the intervention and other is not, and after some time the outcome is compared in both the rates, utilizations are compared in both the population, whether it has actually increased or not. So we can have one or two solutions in two different population, and third population without any, just going on as such without any new intervention. We can test 2 or 3 pilot projects that way. And finally, implementing the most effective solution in the entire system. So the basic point in operational research is to identify the obstacles to providing high quality services, analyze why these obstacles are occurring, and to adopt policies and practices to overcome these obstacles so as to achieve optimal utilization of the resources in the service of the community. And now it has become evident that operational research is a teamwork. So the ideal team has a number of members. The minimum composition in operational research of the team would be one public health administrator, for example the district medical officer, etc., the one who is in administration of the public health services over there, an epidemiologist, a statistician, and a social scientist. A minimum of these 4 people are required, obviously in addition to the other ancillary workers, clerk, peons, data entry officers, field workers, etc. And the team is headed by a director, which usually would be the administrator. Some examples of operational research in health services: calculating the optimal size of area and population to be covered by a midwife or one sub-center, the ideal vehicle for local health workers. For example, bicycles have been proven to be more beneficial than cars or jeeps. Other examples are as listed. The socio-economic status of a country and the healthcare system. How is it affected? How health and healthcare system are affected by the socio-economic background? How can this be measured? It has been seen that health and wealth affect each other. The person is healthy, he is more productive and can earn more wealth. And if a person is wealthy, can procure nutritious items, exercise gear, and can have clean and healthy surroundings. So presence of adequate wealth ensures health, and presence of adequate health ensures productivity. So in other words, it means that on one hand, economic conditions of an individual, household, community and country can affect health. The person who has sufficient funds can eat well, can exercise well, can sleep well, can take adequate rest. If the household is healthful, environment is there, country is clean, and there is availability of nutritious food, sufficient food, then it can affect the health of the individuals. While when the individuals of a country are healthy, the health can determine the capability to strive and achieve economic resources. So indicators of economic conditions which are often considered while presenting the health scenario of a country are the gross national income and gross national income per capita, gross domestic product and gross domestic product per capita. Gross national income. Formerly it was known as gross national product, but now it is known as gross national income. It is the gross income which is generated within the country plus the income which is received from abroad. Includes remittances, exports, money from exports, rent for the premises which are abroad. So net income, because there would be some remittances would be sent from the country also. So net income which is received from abroad plus the gross income which is generated within the country is the gross national income. Gross national income can either be expressed at current prices, that is the prices which are prevailing during this period. These figures are influenced by inflation but are more useful for international comparison for the same period. And GNI can also be expressed in terms at constant prices, that is the prices which are prevailing during a fixed base period in the past. So the products that are made are converted at the same prices for which they would have been available at the fixed base period. So this discounts the effect of inflation and measures the changes in real terms, the increase or decrease in the gross national income in real terms. For this comparison, the national currency of the country is converted to US dollars at the prevailing rates or of the rate in the fixed base period. And so gross national income is expressed in dollars, US dollars. Net national product or net national income is gross national product minus the capital that we consume for the production, that is machinery that is used, equipment that is purchased. So that is net national income. Per capita income is obviously derived by dividing the GNP by the total population, and per capita income measures the standard of living of people in a country. Gross domestic product, on the other hand, is the gross income that is generated within the country. That is, we do not consider the income received from abroad. So net domestic product is the gross domestic product minus the value of depreciation on the fixed asset. What is depreciation? Depreciation is decline in the market value of the assets like buildings, machinery, software, transport equipment through wear and tear and obsolescence. Purchasing power parity. This is something very interesting. Number of units a country's currency is required to buy the same amount of goods and services in the domestic product of that country as $1 would buy in the USA. For example, if a cap is available in India for rupees 10 and the same cap is available in USA for rupees 1, the purchasing power parity of rupees 10 is the same as that of $1, even though the dollar rate on the exchange may be 60 to 70 rupees, but purchasing power parity of $1 is 10 rupees in this scenario. So when the per capita income was calculated by simple converting rupees into dollars by the exchange rates, India fell among the lowest per capita income countries. But when purchasing power parity was considered, India became the fourth largest country in terms of gross national product. PPP is when purchasing power parity was considered instead of the exchange rates. So logically, the phases in operational research comprise formulation of the problem, that is identifying the problem, that is only 20%, for example, only 20% of people are using the healthcare centers provided by the government. Collection of relevant data, usually on a sample, not on the entire population, but on a representative samples, and the data can be both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative are various rates, and qualitative can be going in the population, holding interviews, group discussions. So collection of relevant data and analysis of data to formulation of a hypothesis as to what is hampering proper utilization of the healthcare services provided by the government. Then depending upon those theories, deriving solutions or form the hypothesis and form various models which can be used for improving the utilization rates. Then choosing the optimal solutions and forecasting results for each one of them by using various models, forecasting that putting this, when this intervention is done, this percentage of utilization can improve. So forecasting results. Then testing the chosen solutions in form of pilot projects. And if pilot projects, it can be when one population is given the intervention and other is not, and after some time the outcome is compared in both the rates, utilizations are compared in both the population, whether it has actually increased or not. So we can have one or two solutions in two different population, and third population without any, just going on as such without any new intervention. We can test 2 or 3 pilot projects that way. And finally, implementing the most effective solution in the entire system. So the basic point in operational research is to identify the obstacles to This is the scale of global hunger index ranks of values. This is the formula: proportion of undernourished population plus children underweight, which combines both wasted and stunted children, and under 5 child mortality, divided by 3. Calculation results in 100-point scale. 0 is the best score, that is no hunger. 100 is the worst score. None of the extreme values of 0 and 100 are actually seen in practice, as a value of 100 would mean the whole population is undernourished and that all the children die before attaining 5 years of age. A value of 0 similarly would mean that a country has no undernourished people in the population, no under 5 who is underweight, and no child who died before the 5th birthday. As said before, India ranked 97 among 118 developing countries in 2016. Hidden hunger. What is hidden hunger? Hidden hunger is a form of undernutrition wherein the person does not look malnourished, but there is micronutrient deficiency. So hidden hunger or micronutrient deficiency is a form of undernutrition where either the intake or absorption of micronutrients are too low. Micronutrients include vitamins and minerals, and the intake or absorption are too low to sustain good health and development. Often the signs of this form of malnutrition are hidden, as the individuals may look alright but may suffer from extremely negative impact of micronutrient deficiency. The clinical signs may not be apparent. The clinical signs of these deficiencies may not be apparent because these signs become apparent only when the deficiency becomes severe. But the health and development is affected by even milder forms of deficiencies, that is the invisible effects. of micronutrient deficiency, and that is why this micronutrient deficiency are referred to as hidden hunger. Even mild to moderate deficiency of micronutrients can affect health and socioeconomic development of the person, therefore of the population and of the country. Factors contributing to micronutrient deficiencies may be poor diet, increased need in certain life stages, various diseases, infections and parasites. 1 out of 3 people in developing countries suffers from hidden hunger, and this increases their vulnerability to infection, birth defects and impair the proper development. They habitually eat large amounts of staple food. Such people habitually eat large amounts of staple food, which can be maize, wheat or rye, that are high in calories but lack sufficient micronutrients. Low amount of micronutrients rich foods are a part of their diet, and these food include fruit, vegetable, animal and fish products. The effect of macronutrient deficiency, which may not be accompanied by clinical signs of deficiency, can be mental impairment, poor health and low productivity, premature death. The effects on child health and child survival are particularly acute, especially in the first 1,000 days of life, that is from conception and to the age of 2 years. This can result in serious physical and cognitive consequences. Hidden hunger prevents children from achieving the full development of their physical, intellectual and social potential that they are born with. Hence, hidden hunger can be considered as a human rights issue. Developing countries are moving from minimally processed traditional diet to the highly processed, energy-dense, micronutrient-poor processed food and drinks, and this leads to obesity and poor health. Due to this nutrition transition, many developing countries are now faced a phenomenon known as triple burden. It includes malnutrition due to undernourishment among the poor, micronutrient deficiency, and simultaneously the problem of obesity. Even in higher income groups, hidden hunger can coexist with overweight or obesity. Therefore, an obese child can suffer from hidden hunger.